What's up, gentlemen? This is Rising Phoenix Podcast, a podcast about how to rise up after your divorce. I'm your host, divorce coach Michael Rhodes. Let's get into it. Hello and welcome to the show. This is episode 90. This is going to be a solo episode. I'm going to focus on something that I hear quite a bit and something I can certainly relate to, and that is the question of how could she do this? And not just specifically the divorce, the filing, it could be other things, the cheating, the lying, the complete change of character in a way. And it's a pretty simplistic answer, and I'll get to it in a second, but I'll explain how I came about this answer. And I think it's pretty well established. I'm all about growth and trying to learn and be a better human. And I've been reading a book by Brene Brown called Rising Strong. And I'm not completely through it yet, but I can already highly recommend it to you. It talks a lot about stories and the importance of stories to humans. And if you think about your life and any major event that has occurred, there's a story there. Stories are how we relate. They're how we remember things. They're how we memorialize things. They're what we reflect on, what we celebrate even. And so stories are incredibly important to humans. And when someone's story changes, it changes their view of things and people and situations. And before I dive into what that means for you out there that is asking this question, I'm going to ask you to think about somebody like Lance Armstrong and how everyone thought that guy was, a god nearly, right? He came back from cancer and he won all these Tour de France's, like, I don't know, 7, 10, whatever the fuck the number was. And we all thought he was amazing. And then it came out that he was essentially a cheater. And all of a sudden you see him differently. The story of Lance Armstrong has changed. And so he's not a hero. He's not godlike. And it's not even that he's not that. It's even worse. He's a cheater. He's so far below what we thought. And that is essentially very similar to what happened to you once she decided that she wanted a divorce, because her story changed. Her view of you changed because of that. So instead of viewing you as the husband of her story, you're now not the love of her life. You're not the one that she committed to. You're just potentially just the father of her children. And that unfortunately means that you're not seen in the same way. You might as well be any other dude on the street. And in some ways, you're worse because she has to justify her decision. So she is changing you in your story, much like we all changed Lance Armstrong from hero to villain. And so that's why she can do what she is doing. That's why she can justify it, because in her story, you are now the villain. And so she's going to do things that would be done to a villain, in a sense. She's not going to treat you the same anymore. And it's all important, but here's a really important part of this. And that is that your story does not have to be her story. So the story you're telling yourself is based on what she's telling you. She's leaving. You don't know why. You get the information from her. So your story has gaps in it. You don't understand. Doesn't make sense, but she's feeding you all this stuff. Oh, you're a narcissist. You gaslit me. You're a financial abuser. You're an emotional abuser. You were distant. Whatever the reason is, it doesn't matter. But that's what you're going to fill your story in with, because you have no other info, because it doesn't make sense. And again, this is talked about in Brene Brown's book. This is why things like conspiracy theories are so prevalent, because, again, humans love stories. It's how we relate to the world. It's how the world relates to us. And if we know the beginning and end of a story, but we don't know how we got there, we will fill in the fucking blanks. And so be careful not to allow your blanks, your unknowns, to be filled with negativity, opinions of others, et cetera, et cetera. And especially hers, because again, she is doing whatever she can to justify her decision. So that's another part of this. It's her story has changed because she's emotionally decided she doesn't want to be married anymore. So now her story has changed, right? And so she can't, in her story now, she can no longer think of you as this warm, caring, loving person. You're now the villain. And well, what does that mean? Well, all those negative qualities that you have, and we all have them, suddenly will be amplified to the nth degree. And you are not just someone she doesn't want to be with anymore. She has to justify why. She has to paint you as this monster of this terrible person, because that allows her story and her blanks to be filled in a way that makes sense, to allow her the permission to do what she's doing. And so again, back to my earlier point, do not let her gaps, her information inform your story. You are in charge of your story. It is up to you to change the story, to fill in the blanks. You are not just a piece of shit that was left. You're not a narcissist, just a narcissist that was left, or you weren't an emotional abuser that was left, or whatever she paints you as. That's not who you are. You may have some of those qualities and traits. We make mistakes. We all do. We're all human. And now you have an opportunity to write a new story where you are the hero, where maybe you do have some of these issues and you work on them, you fix them, but you're not this terrible person that she has written her story out to make you. So don't let anybody, quite frankly, paint you in any way that they want. And if they do, that's their story. Let them write it. What is your story? Who are you to you in your story? And it is, I suppose, easier said than done, as all of this sort of self-help discovery journey that we're all on together. It is all easier said than done. But if you do the hard work, and this again goes back to narrative therapy, it is hard work to rewrite your story. But make no mistake about it, when you are in control of your story and you can write it to your benefit, you're going to be much better off than allowing others, including someone who, again, has to justify her decision, to write your story. Write it yourself. Be the person you want to be. And so I can't stress enough how important narrative therapy is. It is very, very powerful. We as humans are lean on, or our lives revolve around stories. Think about all the big moments in your life. Now, the benign in your life, you don't have a story. You know, I got up and I took a shower isn't a fucking exciting story. But the way you found your first house, maybe, or your current job, or how you and your ex met, or a time when you maybe celebrated a little bit too much, or you want to see a baseball game and a fight broke out, or whatever. Like all of those memorable moments in your life surround stories. They're defined by stories. You tell them by stories. And so stories are just incredibly ingrained in who we are. And so that is how she can do what she is doing, because she has changed her story. And you are no longer a husband. You're no longer the history. None of that matters anymore. It's sad. It's unfortunate. It's devastating to those of us that have been rewritten or recast in some way. But I also want to make the point that this is not just women. And again, I know you guys, I think probably a lot of you are preaching to the choir, or I'm preaching to the choir, but I'm sure there are some of you out there that are not completely bought into this, but humans can change their story. And if you're not in a co-ed divorce support group on Facebook, oh man, do I highly recommend that, because there are some horror stories on the other side too. Now, again, grain of salt. I don't know all the details. It's anecdotal and all that kind of good shit, but I hear and read horror stories on the other side as well. When someone decides that they want to change their story for whatever reason, typically an emotional decision, then they will do whatever fits that new narrative, that new story. So if that new narrative and that new story is I'm with this person now, then they'll do whatever they can to justify in their own minds, and that includes men. You can't tell me that men aren't leaving women as well. Of course it happens. Does it really matter who's doing what or what traits people have? Here's what's important and here's what matters. What is your story? What are you writing in that story? And what are you doing? And what are your traits? And what are your values? And what are the things that you care about? It doesn't matter about society. It doesn't matter about female traits, male traits. It really just doesn't matter. It matters, what are you doing? Who are you? What do you stand for? What is your story? What are you writing about yourself? Who are you in your story? So that's why it sounds very simplistic, but that's the absolute truth, is that you have been rewritten in her story. And so therefore, whatever she is doing is not a reflection of the previous story. It's not a reflection of history. That doesn't matter. It should, but it just doesn't. So hopefully this provides some insight. As with many things through this process, it doesn't necessarily mean that makes it easier. I think it kind of does. I think for me, anytime I can understand something, takes the pressure off me. It takes or it certainly does that, but I don't know. It just gives me insight, makes me feel like, oh, okay, I understand. It's not necessarily about me. She didn't just leave, although obviously there are factors that were of my doing, but she didn't just leave because I'm a shitty person. She left because she left, and the reason she is doing these things, behaving in this way, is because her story about me changed. And for whatever reason, that just makes me feel a little bit better. And hopefully it does you too. And know that doesn't mean that the history doesn't mean something to you. It doesn't mean that it isn't important to your children. It just means that to her, it's irrelevant because her story has changed. So I think I've probably said that enough times. Hopefully, again, that helps in some kind of way. It like I said, it does me. So that's all I got. I hope you all are well. If not, please reach out. If you go to my website, risingphoenixdivorcecoach.com, you will find links to our Discord server. You will find links to our local groups as well, trying to grow a network of divorced men to ensure that when men go through this shitty thing, they don't do it alone. So if you're out there and you've not looked yet, I implore you to go and check out the local groups and see if there's one near you. If there is not, there is an email address at the top, and it states very clearly, if you don't see a group near you, please send me an email. And please understand that I'm doing the best that I can, and I don't always get to create new local groups. I have a list that I need to get to, and I just haven't yet, but I will. I promise you. And it's even more of a promise, or more of a sure thing, if you email me at that email. I believe, when I haven't looked, I'm pretty sure it's michael@divorced-mens-network.com. So have some patience with me, please, if you would, but I implore you to take a look and see if there's a local group near you. If you want to run a local group, that would be amazing. I could use the help. And the purpose, and I will wrap up with this, as I like to say, the purpose of those local groups is just to make sure that eventually, when someone starts this process, like I did 3.5 years ago, there will be a network of men waiting with open arms to take him in and give him the love and support he needs to make sure that he doesn't do the ultimate dark, terrible thing and take his own life. So I could use help in running some of these groups. Shout out to Richard and to Scott and Michael for helping me out in their respective local groups. So that's it. That's all I got. Take care. Much love. Thank you so much for watching and or listening. Since my separation in July of 2019, I have done an incredible amount of work on myself. I've had many different therapists, life coaches, and went through different programs. I've taken all that I've learned and put it into my own program called Forged by Fire. If you are interested in having me help you navigate your divorce, please hit my website, risingphoenixdivorcecoach.com. I look forward to working with you.